Feels good to be back in the studio. I think it's been like 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's been a while. This is good.
Yeah,
face to face.
Mel's jumped on and interviewed, which was awesome, by the way. Mike McCann interview was sweet. We've had Jeanette, David. I was by myself, with Huffaker last week. So it's good to be back in the studio. How you been?
We've got the crew back.
The crew, the OG podcasters.
Right. The Goodwill Hunting Boys of Wall Street, or whatever. However you coined us.
That's right. Throw back to Zach Keeps. No, it feels good. And today we're just gonna chat a little bit. It's interesting. The market seems to be opening up a little bit, and I find a lot of real estate agents, kind of with a renewed energy. I think over the last several months, there's been some rest that's been happening, some resetting, refocusing, making sure they're taking care of themselves, which is really, really good, at least in our world. And so I like that. But anyway, it's good to be back in the studio. And I guess as we were talking over the last couple of days, we've been considering, I don't know. I think the conversations between you and I have really focused on self-mastery and just mastering ourselves and in different ways. And, you've been doing so much self-mastery work of late. We got into this conversation about human need. And I wanted to just dig into that a little bit deeper with you.
Yeah. David, that my passion in real estate is building long-term financial wealth through real estate. And through Keller Williams, really, I was introduced to coaching, and that gave me this platform to really start pouring into other people and kind of finding my stride there. And so I started asking myself the question, why do so many people come into real estate and ultimately not succeed? And what do I need to do to become the best coach possible to help more people succeed? What am I not doing as a coach, right? Taking the responsibility. And so going back to that's exactly why I've been doing so much self-development, self-work, so that I can be better for the people around me.
Right, but we can't give what we don't have, what we're not taking in. Yeah.
Right.
I've actually been focusing on that a lot lately too. I'm for a while I had taken the focus off, filling my own bucket to, pour into other people at a higher level. So I'm glad that we're on the same wavelength there.
So I heard about these 6 human needs, and I thought they were really interesting. They gave me really a new perspective and a new understanding, honestly, of some of the decisions I've been making in my life and why I've been making them. And it really helped me see a more clear path as to how to create change in my life. And so I figured if I could kind of, together through this conversation, chunk these down and talk about them, this may open up some conversations or some thoughts in other people that will provoke some changes in their lives as well.
I love provoking people.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we do. We ask the right questions.
Yeah. So, let's just take the first one then. Maybe before we take the first one, human needs, what do we even mean by 6 human needs? Is there a way to define that? Encapsulate it?
I would say that there are things that we do in our lives that fulfill one of these buckets in some way, sometimes in a very productive way, sometimes in a very unproductive way. And these are things that, as human needs by definition, we all have them. There's no way to escape them. The only difference is the order in which we prioritize them and the way in which we fulfill them.
Yeah. And I think as I'm thinking about it, there's no right or wrong with them. They just are.
They just are.
Yeah.
And you'll see as we go through this conversation. So let's start with the first one, which is certainty.
Certainty.
We all have a certain need for certainty in our lives. So what would be an example, David, of how you find certainty in your day or in your week?
How I find certainty?
Yeah.
Schedule.
Yeah. Like a routine, for example, would be a certainty. I wake up in the morning and I kind of go through the same 5-minute process, for example, or the same 20-minute process.
Yeah.
I always get the same result at the end of the day. That gives me certainty that the result will be the same because I do it the same way every day.
Do you think that, okay, so I kind of hear that, and I might term it a little bit different. I'd call it security. Is that the same thing?
In a sense, sure.
So because I've always said that all people are searching for security, and really, what I mean by that is that they're searching for something to hold on to feel like they're in control.
Right. Right. And another example would be, I look up at the ceiling above us right now. If I wasn't certain, or if at least I didn't feel certain that this roof was going to stay standing, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, right? I'd be hauling ass out the door.
Yeah.
And so even just in our environment, in our structures, we have to rely on a certain amount of certainty in our minds that things are going to maintain the structure of the building, for example, so that we can focus on other things. So it goes from a very like practical daily routine to like a very hypothetical building in this scenario.
Well, like non-voluntary things that just like, because we don't give thought to the ceiling, but in our subconscious, I'm sure we're processing the certainty that this roof isn't going to collapse, and therefore I can sit down and I can make other decisions.
Now, let me give you, I like examples because it helps connect dots for people, I think. And so let me give you some healthy examples and some unhealthy examples. And we'll start with unhealthy. One way that people achieve certainty in their lives, for example, is going and smoking a cigarette. They get to escape their existing environment. And what happens when you smoke a cigarette, right? You get the rush of nicotine, but really what you're doing is you're taking a big, deep inhale in, and you're expanding your lungs, and you're bringing oxygen in your body along with a bunch of smoke and chemicals, right? But you have certainty as to the way it's going to make you feel. And I've known a lot of smokers, right? And just by talking to them about this, they all agree with this concept of they know when they go smoke a cigarette, there's a certain amount of certainty. Another thing for some people is they go eat. Right? There's a certain certainty to when I go overindulge and stuff my face and eat a bunch of sweets, there's a way that it's going to make me feel, right? The blood is going to rush to my stomach. I'm going to fall into like a coma-like state. And I know, good or bad, I have certainty that it's going to make me feel a certain way.
It almost sounds like habit.
Yeah.
Like things are habitual because they produce a desired outcome, and so we run to those, or we have these certain habits.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, more productive use of time, obviously a different way that people get certainty is they go for a long run, right? And they know that the endorphins are going to flow, the dopamine's going to be dripping, and they're going to be on cloud 9 by the end of that run. They're going to feel energetic. They've got the blood flowing through their body. They're drinking water, and they run into their day with energy.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a different, more productive way to get certainty. And obviously two extreme examples, smoking a cigarette versus going for a run, on how the same human could achieve ultimately the same need through two very different processes.
Yeah. Positive or negative, or more positive, less positive. Okay. So I think I understand that one. So what's the second one?
So because we're humans and we're very complex people, right? The very next human need is uncertainty. Or variety.
Okay.
We need variety, right? If you knew everything that was going to happen all day, every day, that would become very boring.
Oh, that would be horrific.
That would be horrible, right? So we have to have a certain amount of variety in our lives to mix things up, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I definitely see that. And especially in our business, when you talk to agents, one of the reasons why they want to get into real estate is because it's something different every day.
Right.
Yeah.
You hear it all the time. So let's talk about that. What are some productive ways that we get variety? And then let's talk about some unproductive ways that we get variety.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So a productive way to get variety, going to a new restaurant, right? Watching a new movie, right? Very simple examples of variety. Having a conversation with a stranger, not knowing what's going to happen, right? Going skydiving.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know where that falls on the spectrum, but certainly a way to get variety, right?
That's definitely variety.
And then unproductive ways. What would be an unproductive way to get variety? What comes to mind?
Man, this one's kind of stumping me, Joe.
Getting in an argument with somebody. Would be a way to get variety. Or, an unproductive way to get variety.
Right.
Drinking and going out and getting into bar fights, for an extreme example. Right? Or getting into street fights, right?
That's a certainty in some people's lives.
Right. And honestly, I say it in a joking way, but if you think about it, if you think about the adrenaline you get, violence has existed for as long as humans have been around. And part of that arguably may be because of the uncertainty that sort of interaction creates.
Yeah.
When you get into a fight or a brawl or even like a war, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of uncertainty there, and it's in a lot of variety of outcome of what could happen.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. I could probably point to people who, as young, immature 16-year-olds decided to jump into the military because there was that like rush of I could go die.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Well, I would say I joined the Marines in some sense for variety. I wanted to travel. I wanted to get education. I wanted to meet people from other cultures, right? I grew up in Maine. I wanted to go explore the world.
Yeah.
I wanted that variety. And that had a lot to do with my decision to go into the military. Gambling, unproductive way to get variety. Perfect example.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we need certainty. We need uncertainty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, let me stop right there now that we have those two, because this is a funny example, and I think a lot of people can relate. You ever rent a movie or watch a movie on Netflix that you've already seen?
Yeah.
You have certainty that you know you're going to like it, and you hope that it's been long enough that there's some variety in what you remember and don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
So it's fun.
I'm going to notice something that I didn't notice.
Right.
Or even, there's those movies that I think to myself, I want the end to be different.
Right.
Like you want I want there to be variety, uncertainty in the ending.
Sure.
Like, right. Okay.
Start creating your own ending in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Maybe he doesn't die this time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Interesting. All right. So those are the first two. And I think we all kind of get those, and those are good examples that you're giving. The third one, definitely, I buy into the first two as well. I think you're spot on. But the third one, something, since I was little, like totally believe this. The third one is connection or love, right?
Yeah.
So humans have an innate desire and need to be connected with other people. We're not meant to be alone and isolated. We're meant to be connected and to experience and to give love. Right?
Yeah, 100%. We're tribal by nature, and I might even suggest the one fear that we all have at some level is that we won't be loved. Mm-hmm. Right?
I'd agree. Yeah. Or abandonment.
Sure.
Yeah. Same thing, that we won't be connected to other humans because that love, we've been rejected.
Right.
If you will. Yeah.
Right. And there's obviously, again, different ways that people go about connection with other people. Some do it through volunteering at an organization that's important to them. And that's their way of contributing and giving back and connecting with other humans. Some people do it by, going in and giving money and donating to the homeless. Some people do it by having big families, right? And growing and nurturing the next generation. So there's all kinds of different combinations of ways to get this need fulfilled.
What's, kind of throw the question back to you that you've been posing in the first couple. What's an unhealthy or an unproductive way that people seek out connection?
Yeah, that's a great question. Have you ever known somebody who always seemed to have a problem? Mm-hmm. And that problem that they have, that depressive state, that issue, that challenge, is their way of getting people to pay attention to them.
Yeah. Yep.
And if the problem goes away, so does the attention.
Yep.
And so sometimes we find ways to get attention because we need connection with people, and we don't know another way to get it other than having a problem.
Yeah.
And
totally.
probably
That's
this is
a perfect example.
I would probably suggest that for most of our listeners right now, that probably doesn't apply to them if they're, high level, business people and succeeding. But we probably all know people like that.
Yeah.
And so it's something to be, important to be aware of. And it gives an opportunity for grace, David, because having this conversation right now, hopefully our listeners are hearing this, and the next time that they're in this position, they're understanding with maybe a little bit more empathy when that person does have a problem. Instead of getting frustrated or upset with them about having the problem, understanding that they're ultimately just trying to have a human need fulfilled with connection. And rather than playing into their issue, maybe trying to find a way to fulfill that need by having a different conversation. And by redirecting that person's focus on the connection that they do have instead of the problem that they have.
Yeah. Well, and I think for high performing achievers, I think we even sometimes can create environments like this with people who maybe have unhealthy habits that where they are seeking connection and love. I think sometimes we might have the answer to help them solve that, but because of our own need to come in and be the hero over and over and over, we keep people in that state. Because again, there's some element of control, but there's also this idea that we have a human need fulfilled for connection and love by every time they seek us out for rescue, we get to be the hero. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I have examples, in extended family and whatnot with like drug dependency and things like that, where I swear that's actually the issue at hand. There's something in the family member's mind where, okay, when this exists, I get to come in and be the hero, and that fulfills connection and love. because I'm acting as the rescuer.
And now it's just a habitual negative cycle.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's the definition, the real definition of like codependency. I'm not a psychologist, but
it brings up some interesting thoughts though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
definitely.
if nothing else, hopefully it's provoking some thoughts around how could I approach this differently next time to create a more meaningful interaction, not only for myself, but for that person.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's why it's important that we're having this conversation today.
For sure.
Is at least to just plant the seed.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So certainty, uncertainty, variety.
And then significance.
Connection, love, and significance.
Significance. We all have some need to feel significant. Again, we go about this very different ways. Some people graduate college, join a business, work their way up, and become, a chairman or CEO of a company, and that's their way of significance.
Yep.
Some people, again, do it through having children and raising a family. Some people do it through donating more money to their church than anybody else.
Yep.
Some people get significance through the way they dress. Right, and the louder and the more attention they get through their clothes, the more significance they have. So there's a lot of ways that we achieve significance, and for most people, naturally, significance shows up pretty high on their list.
Well, I was gonna say this. When we're talking through these, this shows up like right at the top of my list.
Yeah.
It's something that, from the time I was little, right? Like, I think back, I needed to be the captain of the T-ball team at 8 years old.
Right.
And even though I wouldn't have worded it this way, it was because I needed to make sure that I was significant in the eyes of coach and everyone else.
Right.
So this is definitely a big deal. And I think it's something that a lot of type A, Enneagram 3, you use whatever personality test you want, but a high achiever, a high performing individual, I think this is definitely going to show up towards the top of the list.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, there's unproductive ways to go about achieving significance. And we've already kind of used a couple of examples. I'll just reiterate some of them. Violence is a way to achieve significance. You think about somebody like, we'll go super extreme here, but like, let's say somebody is burglarizing a house and they end up like pulling out a weapon on somebody. Like, as soon as I'm pointing a weapon at somebody else, I am now significant in your life, whether you like it or not. And again, a real
forced significance,
really extreme example. But there's productive and very unproductive ways to do it. And here's the important note. And the reason why I can use multiple examples for a variety of these needs is because oftentimes one thing that we're doing fulfills multiple human needs at the same time. In fact, if something that you're doing is fulfilling 3 or more of these human needs, then you're most likely to continue doing it.
Okay.
So certain things that we do create both certainty and significance at the same time, or variety and significance at the same time. And so if we have a compounding effect of those human needs being met, then we're going to continue to have those habitual behaviors, whether they're good or whether they're bad.
Do you think that when we aren't getting these things, that the unhealthy, like, grasping to try and get them starts to take over? Like, let me give you an example. We're recording this right after the Conor McGregor Poirier fight, or however you say the other guy's name. I'm not a big MMA guy, but like, Conor McGregor, in my eyes, is becoming less and less significant. Like, yeah, at me, Connor. Let's go. But he's becoming less and less significant. And what's interesting is I'm starting to see more and more unhealthy ways that he's grasping after going after that significance.
Right.
Right. Where it used to be an athletic endeavor that allowed him to be significant in the eyes of everyone who's a fan. Now he's going about it through calling out his competitor's wife, saying that she's in his DMs, and or making up these ludicrous stories about medical things and the MMA just to keep him trending on Twitter.
Right.
And so it's just, I guess it's causing me to think, like, when we're not like when one of these needs takes over in our life and becomes the ultimate thing that we're after, the unhealthy pursuit of that tends to show up more and more. I guess I'm trying to tease that out a little.
No, I
bit
completely
more.
agree with what you're saying. I love that you're making that connection because some of the examples I gave were very extreme, and some of the examples you're giving are much more literal and recognizable in our environment. I mean, everything everybody does is ultimately fulfilling one of these needs, or one or more.
Yep.
And so you're absolutely right that in the pursuit of fulfilling a need, even if it's started as a positive way, it can very quickly unravel itself, as the example you just gave.
Definitely. All right. So those are the first four.
And what's important to say about those first four, David, is that those first four are kind of non-negotiable, meaning everybody will find a way to fulfill those four needs, kind of no matter what. Again, in a different priority and in a different way, but we all have these four showing up in our lives. And so the first thing I want to say to our listeners right now is, which of these top four are sort of at the top of your list right now? Which one's showing up? Which one, as you're hearing us talk about it, is showing up most significantly in your life? Which one's at the top of your list based on where you are today? And as you're thinking about that, I want to introduce the final two human needs because these ones are kind of more optional. These ones, not everybody finds a way to fulfill. However, once fulfilled, lead to the most joy. Okay, and so that's important, obviously, for us to spend some time thinking about.
Well, can we pause for a second? Like,
sure.
Are you okay with sharing? Like, what tend to show up at the top for you, or to this point have shown up at the top?
Yeah, I will say prior to me learning about these human needs, I would say that significance was very much at the top of my list.
Okay.
And the way that I was going about achieving significance in my life, ever since I was young, honestly, was I needed to make more money than anybody else.
Yeah.
I thought if I had more money and more control and more power, I would have more significance in the eyes of others. I came from a home that we were fine, but we certainly weren't, cash rich by any means, by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
And so I think I decided at a very early age, I wanted to have I wouldn't have used the word significance at the time, but significance through financial gain.
Yeah.
And so I found myself making decisions, and I'd say I've lived a fairly productive life up until this point. And after,
I'd agree.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Business partner, I guess. I would hope so. And I would say that some of the decisions I've made and some of the processes I've had to go through, now that I'm more aware, I'm looking back and saying, is that really the human need that I want to be at the top of my list?
Yeah.
Or could that be replaced with something more productive?
Yeah.
And that's really where the other two kind of come in, because I did ultimately have to move, and I made a conscious decision to move significance down on my list.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And I already shared that significance shows up all over the place. And so for the second one, I think it's dependent on the season of life a little bit. I think prior to having a spouse, a life partner, I would have said like connection, love was definitely number two. I think over the last several years, probably certainty moved into that second, specifically described around like security, right?
Yeah.
Where I was a little bit more risk adverse in some things because certainty was right at the top of the list. So I think those are probably my two, as we go through these things. All right. So those are the foundational, the four. So what are the two then that like not all of us tap into? Yeah.
And I'll package these together. Growth and contribution. And, obviously some people choose to grow, and I think it's important for us as humans to feel like we're making progress, right? To feel like we're moving further. Even if we're not at our goal, we need to feel like we're moving closer to our goal. Otherwise, we feel stagnant, right? We feel like we're dying, right?
Yeah.
We feel empty inside if we feel like we're stationary for any long period of time, which is exactly why once people achieve that, that American dream of financial freedom, they go on vacation for about 6 days and then they get bored and they're like, all right, back to it.
Yeah.
And they just keep building, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they know if they're not growing, then you become empty, right? There's a lack of joy with a lack of growth.
Yeah. The quote that comes to mind, John D. Rockefeller was asked like, how much money is enough? And he said, just $1 more, just $1 more. And I'm pretty sure that if you if you translate his wealth into today's dollars, I mean, he'd be by far the wealthiest individual on the planet right now. And it's just interesting because some of these things that we hunt for, like for significance, once we get to that destination, like you said, it doesn't necessarily deliver that joy that we actually are looking for.
Right.
Very interesting.
Exactly.
Okay, so growth and contribution. I mean, I think about contribution specifically, and it, like, to me, that makes perfect sense because, you know, at least me personally, I've never believed that humans like exist ultimately for like ourselves. We get something out of like contributing to society, contributing to others, you know. The language I like to use is just like pouring myself out for someone else is what leads to like happiness and true significance.
Right.
I mean,
that's kind of like the secret message, right? We all kind of know that.
I'm glad I decoded the secret message.
Yeah, like we all kind of feel more like we all can kind of say we're willing to do more for others than we're willing to do for ourselves. And I bet every single one of our listeners right now could come up with several examples of how that's shown up in their lives and how they've proven that to be true for them. Sometimes it's hard to understand why. Like, why am I so willing to go so far for that friend or family member, sometimes stranger, than I am for myself?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a tricky, like, you know, mind puzzle. And I think to your point, David, by giving back to more people, you end up basically fulfilling almost all of these needs simultaneously. Because you're getting significance and connection and certainty through your contribution in some level.
So is the message, if we were to we just boiled down all of like human life to six words. But if what we're saying is true, then does kind of the ultimate like statement to tie it all together, if we pursue like a life of growth and contribution, then we get the other 4 human needs fulfilled? Like, is it that simplistic?
I don't know if it's that simplistic. I think to some extent you're definitely onto something. I think what I want to challenge our listeners to do is to identify, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, first, what are the 2 human needs that have been showing up in your life so far? And then the next and more important question is, as you look into the future and as you think about your goals and who you want to be as a person, what are the 2 human needs that would need to be at the top of your list, that you would need to live into the most at the highest priority for you to fulfill your idea of what your destiny should look like? And for most people, like I mentioned, significance is typically at the top of the list. And if you can find a way to replace that with growth, contribution, love, and connection, right? Any combination of those further toward the top of the list, you're going to see a domino effect in the fulfillment that you feel through that process once you start living it. And so I'll go back to my example. I was trying to find significance through financial gain. Going through this process for myself, I realized, why do I want financial gain? Well, I did want the significance in other people's lives, but really I thought that significance was going to give me more love and connection and more devotion of people. And so what if I just simply changed my order of operations here and focused on love and connection, starting with the people that already are in my lives. Yeah. And being aware that as I'm striving for this mystical love and connection, it's already all around me. Yeah. And trading my expectations of what might happen in the future for the appreciation of what I have today.
Isn't it interesting how no matter how far we think we've come on this journey, whatever that means, we miss what's so blatantly obvious, like right in front of us sometimes.
That's so true.
Because as you say that, I'm smiling to myself because, you know, there are times when I do get out of whack with these things, and you know, I'm fortunate enough to have some love and connection in my life through my wife, and she'll sometimes gently but like firmly say, like, you know, no matter what happens, remember that we're still here at the dinner table no matter what, right? And it like that hits me and kind of allows me, that's like kind of a function in my life that allows me to put some of these things back in order. Because like yeah, no matter who rejects me, doesn't accept me, connect with me, love me, no matter what certainty or uncertainty exists in my life, like my significance, I still have those connections around me.
Right.
And so that's how it shows up in my life. And I'm fortunate for that. And it sounds like you kind of were going through that same thing. Like if I pursue the love and connection of the people already around me, then some of these things follow.
Well, and interestingly enough, if number 2 on my list becomes growth, which it has, personal growth, which is exactly why I've been learning about these concepts and we're having this conversation, then through my connection with others and through my own growth and my ability to contribute more to them, I not only get the money that I want at the end of the day, right? Because I still want to have financial freedom. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing at all.
But the way I go about it is so very different. And I even get more significance in other people's eyes because I've contributed to them through my own growth.
Yeah.
And so just by reframing that concept in my mind, I've been able to quite literally change my value system in a certain way to say, connection and growth are my top 2 values. And now every decision I make is based on that, knowing that the domino effect will be more joy and fulfillment in the long term.
Yeah. I really love that because it kind of ensures that when you get to wherever you're going, whatever that pinnacle looks like for you, that you haven't destroyed everything else in the process.
Yeah.
Because I don't think none of us want to get to that place and have destroyed everything around us, right? I mean, we don't. And yet, if we're not conscious about how we're going about and positioning these human needs, that's what so often happens in our fight to get significance or love and connection or certainty or variety, whatever.
Right.
We end up destroying the very things that we had in the first place that brought joy. So, wow, this is a deep conversation.
It is, and hopefully some of our listeners are thinking through this and hearing us. And
everyone's parked on the side of the street right now, and they're just crying in their cars.
Gosh. I certainly hope
just
not.
call us Oprah Winfrey.
Right. There we go.
But no, I think it's a really good conversation for business people to have.
Well, and I want to credit Tony Robbins with this content because that's really where I learned it, and he's been my number 1 mentor, even though I've never actually met him. And one of the things he said, and I'll give him this quote, is in life, the only thing we get to keep is what we give.
In life, the only thing we get to keep
is what we give. And I found that interesting because the way I interpret that for myself is obviously we know when we die, we don't to take anything with us.
Yeah.
Right. But what's left behind is a legacy. And that legacy for me is going to be what I've given to other people, the way I'm remembered, the impact that I've had. Right. And I think we all want that at some level, and we understand that. And it goes back to why are we always willing to do more for others? It's because I think unconsciously maybe we know that when we leave this earth, the only thing left behind will be the memory of us and the impact that we've had. And the impact that we've had that's going to survive is the value and the contribution we've given to the next generation moving down the line.
Definitely. Man. Guys, I hope this conversation's been helpful to you. I hope it's helped you ask some, deep and probing questions. Definitely some good stuff to maybe listen back to with a journal. Spend some time thinking. We'd love to hear from you guys. And if you have any further thoughts on this or ways that this has played itself out in your life, we'd love to hear that. We'd love to hear from you guys. If you haven't left a rating or review on iTunes, it's how we're able to continue to grow and contribute and bring value into your lives, which is something Joe and I love doing. And so, Joe, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap up today's show?
Well, I'll just reiterate what you said, David, about listening back with a journal. Hopefully they've taken some notes, and I encourage you to find some time to be alone, 15 or 20 minutes, to really process through these thoughts and ask yourself these questions.
Love it. Hey guys, as always, we love having you here every single week, and we'll be back next week with another exciting interview. You won't want to miss it. And so go on out, think about these things, and play all in.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play all in.